Wind lashes sideways across a snow-buried mountain turnout as hazard lights flicker against a wall of white. A wheelchair lies tipped near a rental cabin porch, half buried in ice. A German shepherd stands planted in front of it, ears forward, breath steaming, body square and controlled as two suited men try to push past him. Stay. The command is calm, measured. The dog does not lunge. He does not bark wildly. He holds the line. Behind him stands retired Navy SEAL Chief Mason Reed, snow crusted across his shoulders, one gloved hand resting lightly on the shepherd's collar. His other arm supports a woman wrapped in a thermal blanket against his truck. Her wedding dress is torn. Her lips are blue. Her hands tremble from cold and shock. The suited men shout over the wind. She's confused. We're family. A handful of stranded motorists stand back, phones raised. Recording. Watching. Snow thickens. Visibility drops by the second. The bride's voice barely carries through the storm. They left me to freeze. The German shepherd's growl stays low, disciplined, unwavering as new headlights crest the hill behind the men. Who are they really protecting her from? If loyalty still matters to you, stay with brave K9 stories. Tell us in the comments, what would you do in this storm? Mason Reed measures his life in routines. Wake before sunrise. Check perimeter. Split wood. Radio scan. Short run along the ridge. No headlines. No neighbors. No unnecessary contact. Iron Ridge sits high above the nearest paved road, wrapped in pine and rock and winter silence. Mason chose it because silence does not ask questions. Valor understands the rhythm better than anyone. The German shepherd moves with disciplined purpose, conducting slow patrol arcs around the cabin every morning. He pauses at tree lines, checks wind direction, listens. He is not restless. He is not wild. He works. Mason does not need to give constant commands. One look is enough. Perimeter, Mason says softly. Valor completes the outer sweep and returns to heel without praise. It is not coldness. It is respect. They both know what they are for. By mid-morning, snow begins to fall harder than forecasted. The radio crackles, then fades. Mason is stacking split logs when his satellite phone buzzes. The caller ID reads Clara Bennett. Clara lives 2 miles down the mountain and manages the Hollow Creek rental cabin during tourist season. She rarely calls unless something matters. Mason, she says, voice tight. Wedding renters were supposed to check in yesterday. I haven't seen their car go up. Storm's closing in. Can you swing by and look? He almost says no. It is not his problem. But Clara helped him settle paperwork when he bought his land. That counts. I'll check, he answers. Valor is already at the truck before Mason finishes locking the door. The drive to Hollow Creek is slow and narrow. Snow builds along the edges. Visibility drops. Mason notices something immediately when the cabin comes into view. No vehicle. No tire tracks beyond yesterday's faint markings. The porch light flickers weakly in daylight. The front door is not fully shut. Mason steps out. The wind bites. Valor circles once, then freezes. The dog's nose lifts. Ears tilt forward. His body stiffens into focused alert. Search. Valor moves past the front steps without hesitation. He tracks around the side of the cabin, paws crunching over ice crust. Mason follows, boots heavy in snow. The back porch tells the real story. A wheelchair sits angled near the railing, one wheel half over the edge. Snow has begun to fill the seat. Mason's jaw tightens. Down. Valor lowers, scanning the tree line while Mason checks the door. It opens with minimal resistance. Inside the cabin is cold. The fireplace is empty. No wood staged. No decorations. No flowers. No signs of celebration. The kitchen counters are bare. This was never a wedding weekend. Valor moves ahead, nose pulling him toward the living area. And there she is. A woman in a wedding dress slumps in her wheelchair near the center of the room. Fabric damp. Shoulders shaking faintly. Her lips are blue. Her skin pale against white lace. Guard. Valor positions himself beside her, body angled outward, providing heat and watchfulness. Mason kneels. Her phone lies smashed near her hand. Not dropped, crushed. The battery compartment of her wheelchair is open and empty. That was not an accident. Her eyelids flutter. "Hey," Mason says steadily. "Stay with me." She swallows with effort. "He left." "Who?" "Lucas Carrington." The name comes out fractured. "Said he'd get help. There are no tire tracks leaving recently. No return attempt." Mason feels something old and sharp rise in his chest. A memory of another winter. Another body he reached too late. Call he hesitated on. Not again. He lifts her carefully from the chair, wraps her in his insulated jacket before even reaching the truck. Valor moves ahead and circles once before jumping into position at the rear seat. Snow thickens fast now. Inside the truck, Mason cranks heat and checks her pulse. Weak but steady. "You're not alone," he says quietly. She grips his sleeve with surprising strength. They wanted control. The wind slams against the vehicle. Signal bars show nothing. As Mason shuts the passenger door and rounds to the driver's side, Valor's head snaps toward the treeline. A low growl builds in his throat. Not panic. Recognition. Mason pauses. Somewhere beyond the pines, beneath the storm, an engine hums closer. He cannot see it yet, but someone is coming. The engine Mason heard finally breaks through the storm. Then another. 2 black SUVs crest the ridge road, headlights cutting through snow like knives. They do not hesitate when they see his truck. They pull in fast, tires crunching hard over ice, stopping in a tight angle that blocks the narrow turnout. Valor's growl deepens but remains contained. "Stand." The German Shepherd rises instantly into a forward-braced position beside the open truck door. He does not bark. He does not strain. He watches. The driver's side door of the first SUV opens with measured calm. A woman steps out as if this were a red carpet arrival, not a mountain blizzard. Mid-50s. Perfect posture. Dark wool coat tailored to precision. No visible panic in her face despite the wind whipping around her. Her heels somehow manage the ice without slipping. Victoria Carrington. She takes one assessing look at Mason, then at Eleanor wrapped in the blanket inside the truck. "Oh, thank God," she says, voice warm enough to sound maternal. "There you are." She approaches slowly, hands visible, expression composed. 2 large men exit the second SUV and position themselves several steps behind her. Not random bodyguards. Trained. Alert. "She's hypothermic," Mason says flatly. She was alone in that cabin. Victoria does not look at him when she answers. She looks only at Eleanor. "Sweetheart, you must be so confused. We've been looking everywhere." Eleanor's fingers tighten against the blanket. Her lips tremble from cold, but her voice finds strength. "He left me." Victoria's expression flickers for half a second before smoothing over. "Lucas went for help." The storm worsened unexpectedly. "There were no outgoing tracks," Mason replies. Now Victoria turns her gaze to him fully and smiles. "You must be Mr. Reed, isn't it?" she says softly. The mountain recluse. Stranded motorists have begun stepping from their cars, drawn by headlights and raised voices. Phones lift. Snow sticks to sleeves as they record. Victoria gestures lightly toward Mason. "This man removed my future daughter-in-law from private property without permission. She would have frozen," Mason says. Victoria tilts her head. "Eleanor has episodes. Emotional instability since her accident. It's all documented." One of the suited men shifts closer to the passenger door. Valor steps forward exactly 1 pace. "Hold." The dog plants himself between the suited man and the truck, shoulders squared, teeth still hidden but presence undeniable. The suited man stops. Victoria's tone drops slightly. "You have no idea who she belongs to." The word belongs hangs in the air. A murmur passes through the small crowd. Someone whispers, Is this a family dispute? Another says, maybe he did take her. Victoria capitalizes instantly. She's scheduled for a conservatorship review tomorrow, she says, loud enough for phones to capture. For her protection. We were bringing her down the mountain when she panicked. Mason looks at Eleanor. Her eyes widen. What review? She whispers. Victoria's smile tightens. You know how these things work, dear. It's in your best interest. Mason notices something critical. Eleanor's confusion is real. If there were a hearing, she was never informed. That is not protection. That is positioning. One of the security men steps around the rear of the truck and reaches for the blanket near Eleanor's shoulder. Sir, he says to Mason, voice forced calm. We'll take it from here. Valor shifts again. Stand. The dog blocks the door completely now, chest aligned with the man's thigh, eyes locked upward. A low vibration hums in his throat. Not aggressive. Controlled warning. The security man hesitates. Snow intensifies. Visibility shrinks. Headlights reflect off swirling white. Eleanor forces her voice through chattering teeth. He turned off my chair. The words cut through wind sharper than any shout. Victoria's composure cracks for a fraction of a second. Then she recovers. She's delirious. The crowd splits. Some nod sympathetically toward Victoria's polish and confidence. Others stare at the smashed wheelchair still visible near the cabin porch. Mason steps forward half a pace. She stays with me until she's medically stable. Victoria studies him in silence. Then she steps back toward her SUV. You're making a serious mistake, she says quietly. The court will decide who controls her life. The engines start again. The SUVs reverse carefully. Snow spraying from spinning tires. As they pull away, Valor continues staring into the storm long after the headlights disappear. Mason knows one thing now with certainty. This was never about rescue. It was about ownership. Mason does not drive toward town. He drives higher. His cabin sits above most cell coverage and above most interference. If someone wants to reach it, they have to mean it. Valor rides upright in the back seat beside Eleanor, body angled so that his warmth presses into her legs. Every few seconds he glances up at Mason through the rearview mirror, waiting for direction. Easy, Mason says quietly. The heater runs full blast. Snow chases them the entire climb. Inside the cabin, Mason moves with controlled efficiency. Fire lit. Blankets layered. Dry clothes. He kneels to examine Eleanor's hands and feet under better light. Surface frostbite beginning along her fingers. Skin pale, waxy at the edges. He documents everything with his phone. Tell me your name, he says steadily. Eleanor Whitmore. Do you understand where you are? Yes. Do you understand that I'm recording this with your consent? Yes. Valor lies near the door but keeps his head up. Watch. The shepherd shifts slightly, eyes tracking every window, every sound beyond the walls. Eleanor's breathing stabilizes as warmth returns. Mason holds the phone steady. Tell me what happened. He swallows. Lucas Carrington brought me to the cabin. Said it would be quiet before the ceremony. He unplugged my chair battery. Said he'd grab something from the truck. He never came back. Did I force you into my vehicle? No. Did you ask for help? Yes. Mason nods once and ends the recording. He does not trust mountain rumor cycles or wealth-driven narratives. He sends the file immediately to 3 contacts from his past life. 1 former team member. 1 investigative journalist he once helped during a hurricane rescue. 1 secure cloud archive with auto-forward encryption. Small action. Permanent record. By nightfall the story changes online. Lucas Carrington releases a statement through his family office. Eleanor has been experiencing emotional instability related to her condition. A local man has removed her from supervised care without permission. Authorities have been notified. The word abducted appears in comments beneath it within minutes. Snow continues falling. Headlights approach near midnight. Valor's ears lift before Mason hears the vehicle. Heel. The dog moves to Mason's side as he opens the door. A county deputy steps out of a patrol SUV. Hat pulled low against snow. "Evening," the deputy says cautiously. "We've had a report." Mason steps aside enough for the deputy to see Eleanor sitting upright near the fire. "She requested help. I have it recorded." The deputy shifts weight. His gaze flickers toward Valor, who stands silent but steady at Mason's thigh. "She under any guardianship order?" Mason asks. "Paperwork's being filed," the deputy answers carefully. "Emergency conservatorship hearing tomorrow morning." Eleanor's head turns sharply. "I never signed anything." The deputy clears his throat. "Mr. Carrington states you've been under evaluation for cognitive instability." Valor's tail goes rigid. "Watch." The dog's eyes lock onto the deputy's hands. "I'm not here to make arrests," the deputy says quickly. "Just advising that if there's a court directive, we may have to return her for her own safety." The phrase hangs heavy. "Return her. Like property." Mason's jaw tightens, but his voice stays level. "You're welcome to view the video statement." The deputy watches it in silence, wind rattling the cabin windows behind him. When it ends, he exhales slowly. "That complicates things." "It clarifies them," Mason replies. The deputy nods once. "I'll note that she appears coherent. But if a judge signs an order..." "Understood." The deputy leaves, tires crunching down the slope. Silence returns. Firelight flickers across Eleanor's face. Her strength is returning, but fear now replaces cold. "You don't understand," she says quietly. "If they declare me incompetent, control of Whitmore Innovations transfers to a court-appointed conservator." Mason studies her. "How much control?" "All of it." "How much is the company worth?" He hesitates. "Billions." The word settles into the room like another storm front. "And the ruling happens tomorrow." "Yes." Valor shifts closer to Eleanor's chair, resting his chin lightly against her knee. Mason looks toward the dark windows. This is no longer about a stranded bride. It is about leverage worth more than the mountain itself. Outside, snow keeps falling. And somewhere below the ridge, lawyers are moving faster than the storm. By dawn, Eleanor's frostbite needs professional evaluation. Mason does not like bringing her into town, but untreated injury is not an option. Snow has slowed but not stopped. The roads are slush and ice. Valor sits upright beside Eleanor in the back seat as they pull into Summit Valley Medical Center. The moment the automatic doors open, the temperature changes. Not just the air. Tone. The front desk staff recognize her immediately. Whispers ripple down the corridor. A hospital administrator arrives within minutes. Mid-40s. Controlled smile. Polished tone. "Ms. Whitmore," she says gently, "we were informed you might arrive. Unfortunately, due to ongoing guardianship proceedings, we require consent from your designated representative before admission." Eleanor blinks. "I am my own representative." The administrator's smile does not move. "There are documents indicating otherwise." Mason steps forward slightly. "She has frostbite." "Of course. We can do a preliminary assessment in triage, but formal admission requires authorization." Two security officers drift closer, not overtly aggressive, but positioning matters. Close. Valor moves instantly, aligning himself beside Eleanor's wheelchair. His body forms a barrier between her and the approaching security guard. No growl, no bark, just steady presence. People in the waiting area begin noticing. Phones appear again. The administrator lowers her voice. "Mr. Reed, we're not accusing you of anything. But there are concerns about undue influence." "From me?" Mason asks. "From anyone," she corrects smoothly. Across the hallway, Victoria Carrington stands near the elevators. Perfect coat, perfect hair, perfect timing. She is speaking into her phone. "Yes," she says quietly, back turned but voice carrying in the sterile corridor. Once the competency order is signed, the interim CEO appointment will proceed immediately. Mason's gaze sharpens. CEO appointment. This was never about medical care. It is about corporate control. Eleanor hears it too. Her fingers tremble on the armrest. Maybe I'm not thinking clearly, she whispers to Mason. Maybe they're right. He kneels slightly so he is at eye level. You were coherent last night. You are coherent now. What if the stress makes me seem unstable? Stress doesn't erase capacity. A nurse approaches hesitantly with a tablet. Ms. Whitmore, could you verify your identity? Eleanor answers calmly. Date of birth. Social security digits. Corporate address. The nurse nods and moves away. Mason notices something as the administrator reviews a digital file at the desk. A highlighted line on the screen catches his eye when the tablet turns slightly. Cognitive impairment. Ongoing psychological instability following trauma. He steps closer. That's not her physician's format, he says quietly. The administrator stiffens. Excuse me. That file header is wrong. Font's inconsistent. It's been inserted. She turns the screen away quickly. Sir, you are not authorized to review confidential medical information. Eleanor looks between them. I've never been diagnosed with cognitive impairment, she says, voice steadier now. Victoria approaches at that moment, expression soft and concerned. Sweetheart, she says, placing a hand lightly on the wheelchair handle. This is exactly what we were afraid of. You've been influenced. Valor's head lifts instantly. Watch. The dog's eyes fix on Victoria's hand resting too close to Eleanor's shoulder. Victoria removes it. Let's not make a scene, she says. But there is already a scene. People are filming, whispering, watching wealth and authority collide with something less polished but more grounded. The administrator clears her throat. Given the pending hearing, we can provide emergency stabilization only. Further decisions must wait for court. A clerk approaches with a sealed envelope. Ms. Whitmore. Eleanor takes it with shaking fingers. Summons. Emergency competency hearing. 24 hours. Mason feels the shift. The mountain was isolation. The hospital is pressure. And now the system itself is moving. Valor remains beside Eleanor's wheelchair, steady as a wall. Mason looks down at the summons, then across the hallway at Victoria. She smiles again, confident, as if tomorrow is already decided. Back at the cabin, the fire burns low and steady. Snow presses against the windows like a quiet siege. Eleanor sits at the table with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the court summons as if it might rearrange itself into something less final. Mason steps outside onto the covered porch, satellite phone in hand. He scrolls to a name he has not called in years. Grant Holloway. Former intelligence officer. Relentless with data. Quiet with judgment. The call connects on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd reach out again, Chief, Grant says. I need a full dive, Mason replies. Victoria Carrington. Lucas Carrington. Whitmore Innovations. There is a pause. Give me an hour, Grant says. And brace. Snow thickens as Mason waits. Valor stands beside him, scanning the tree line as always. Controlled. Patient. When the phone vibrates again, Mason answers immediately. She's not Victoria Carrington, Grant says without preamble. Her birth name is Victoria Mercer. Mason says nothing. Grant continues. 3 marriages before this circle. All to high-net-worth men. All deceased within 6 to 8 years. Official cause. Natural heart failure. No criminal findings. Pattern. Each time she walked away with significant inheritance or corporate shares. Quiet exits. No noise. Mason exhales slowly. And Lucas. Not biological son, Grant says. Adopted at 16 from a private youth program. Financially supported through elite schooling. Groomed into the right social circles. Asset. Mason mutters. Looks that way. Grant's voice lowers slightly. There's more. Whitmore Innovations has been hemorrhaging stock value over the last 6 months. Anonymous leaks. Questionable board votes. Internal instability. Someone's been eroding confidence deliberately. Sabotage, Mason says. Yes. And here's the critical part. If Eleanor is ruled incompetent, interim control transfers to a conservator with board alignment. And that person, Lucas Carrington. Silence settles between them. Grant adds one more detail. Public sentiment isn't on your side. Carrington PR machine is pushing a narrative that you're isolating a vulnerable billionaire for influence. Hashtag campaigns already building. Mason looks back through the window at Eleanor. Inside, she stares at her reflection in the darkened glass. He ends the call and walks back in. She's not who she says she is, he tells Eleanor. Victoria Mercer. 3 wealthy husbands. All dead of natural causes. Eleanor closes her eyes briefly. And my father, she asks. Your father's passing should be reviewed. She absorbs that without visible collapse. And Lucas, she asks. Adopted. Positioned. A strange calm settles over her expression. So I was never the bride, she says quietly. I was the acquisition. Mason does not soften the truth. Yes. Outside, wind rattles the structure. Inside, Eleanor straightens in her chair. I won't hide, she says suddenly. Mason studies her. They want me quiet. Confused. Protected, she continues. I won't disappear into this mountain while they rewrite my life. That increases exposure, Mason says. I know. For the first time, her voice carries something beyond fear. Resolve. Grant calls again before Mason can respond. One more thing, Grant says. There's a name tied to Mercer's early legal filings. Edwin Clark. Disbarred attorney. Quietly relocated to San Francisco 5 years ago. Connection. He handled estate transitions after her first husband died. There were whispers of irregularities. Nothing proven. Alive. Yes. Mason looks at Eleanor. If someone helped her do this before, he says slowly, he might know how. Grant's voice sharpens. If Mercer senses exposure, Clark becomes a liability, meaning he could disappear. The midpoint shifts everything. This is no longer just about surviving tomorrow's hearing. It is about uncovering a pattern that has worked for years. Eleanor grips the edge of the table. If they've done this before, she says, I won't be the next quiet death. Outside, Valor lifts his head at a distant sound far below the ridge. Mason understands. The storm is not the only thing moving. By morning, Summit Valley Medical Center feels less like a hospital and more like a staging ground. Eleanor insisted on returning for follow-up treatment before the hearing. Mason did not like it, but untreated frostbite could undermine her credibility in court. They arrived early, hoping for quiet. They were wrong. A private ambulance sits idling at the rear entrance. No county markings. No local hospital insignia. Just a clean white exterior and 2 men in pressed uniforms standing beside a stretcher. Valor notices them before Mason does. The dog's ears shift. Watch. Valor's gaze locks on the ambulance doors. Inside the hospital corridor, a nurse approaches Eleanor with a strained smile. Ms. Whitmore, transport has been arranged to a specialized care facility. I didn't authorize transport, Eleanor replies. It's been approved by your legal representative. My what? Mason steps forward. There is no court order yet. The nurse hesitates. We were told the order is imminent. 2 uniformed transport attendants approach with the stretcher. Valor moves instantly to Eleanor's side. Close. The shepherd positions tight against her wheelchair, shoulder aligned with her knee, forming a barrier. One attendant attempts to step around. Sir, please step aside. No court order, Mason repeats. The attendant glances toward the corridor. Victoria stands near the reception desk, speaking softly into her phone. "Proceed," she says quietly. The second attendant reaches toward Eleanor's chair handle. Valor's posture changes. No bark, no snap, just forward pressure. "Stand." The dog blocks the reach cleanly, chest firm against the attendant's thigh. The man instinctively steps back. Security officers begin moving in from both ends of the hallway. "This is authorized," one of them says. "Show me the paperwork," Mason answers. One of the transport attendants pulls a phone from his pocket, scrolling quickly. In the confusion, the phone slips from his gloved hand and skids across the tile floor. Valor reacts before anyone else. "Get it!" The command is sharp but controlled. The German Shepherd moves fast, grips the phone carefully in his mouth without cracking the screen, and returns immediately to Mason's side. The attendant lunges to grab it. "Back," Mason orders. Valor holds position. On the unlocked screen, a text thread is visible. Mercer Holdings. Discretion required. Transport before hearing. Do not allow external counsel. Mason turns the phone so the security officers can see. "Is this standard medical protocol?" he asks evenly. Murmurs ripple through the corridor. The attendant stiffens. "That's confidential." "So is attempted unlawful transfer," Mason replies. Victoria's composure tightens across the hallway. Mason quickly photographs the screen with his own phone before handing it to the nearest officer. "Chain of custody," he says calmly. The officers exchange uncertain looks. This is no longer a simple transport. It is documented. The ambulance crew backs away slowly. Victoria's eyes meet Mason's. Cold. Calculated. "You're interfering with legal proceedings," she says softly. "Then file it properly," Mason answers. The private ambulance leaves without Eleanor. But pressure does not ease. Mason steps aside and calls Grant. "I need ownership records on that ambulance company," he says. Minutes later, Grant replies. "Registered to Summit Executive Transit," Grant says. "Parent company linked through shell layers to Mercer Holdings." There it is. Second confirmation. "And Clark?" Mason asked. "Financial records show recurring transfers to Edwin Clark over the last 5 years," Grant replies. "Consulting fees." "Consulting for what?" Eleanor listens to the exchange, her hands steady now. "They were going to move me out of jurisdiction," she says quietly. "Yes," Mason replies. An orderly rushes down the corridor toward them. "Ms. Whitmore, the hearing has begun," he says. "You're expected downtown." Mason checks the time. They are already late. Victoria's plan becomes clear in real time. Delay. Isolate. Relocate. If Eleanor is absent when the judge calls her name, the narrative writes itself. Valor presses gently against Eleanor's leg as Mason wheels her toward the exit. The pressure cooker tightens. The hearing has started without them. The courthouse steps are crowded when Mason arrives. Cameras. Reporters. Curious onlookers drawn by wealth and scandal. Snow melts into slush beneath hurried shoes. Valor walks tight at Mason's side. "Heel." The dog stays aligned, head level, ignoring flashing lights and shouted questions. Inside, tension hums through the marble corridors. Victoria stands near the courtroom doors with a stack of documents in hand. Lucas Carrington stands beside her, pale but composed, speaking to a cluster of microphones. "She's been struggling for months," Lucas says loudly enough for the cameras. "We've tried to protect her from herself. This situation is tragic." Eleanor stiffens in her chair. "I was left in a freezing cabin," she says under her breath. Victoria steps forward as they approach. "An emergency seizure order has been filed," she announces calmly. Given the clear instability displayed this morning, the court may authorize immediate custodial supervision. "Based on what?" Mason asked. "Behavior consistent with delusional paranoia," Lucas answers smoothly. "Claims of abandonment. Corporate sabotage. It's textbook displacement." The words are designed to sound clinical. "Official. Reasonable. Eleanor's hands tighten against her armrests. They enter the courtroom. The judge listens as Victoria's attorney outlines the emergency petition. References to psychological decline, emotional volatility, unsafe associations. Mason sees it happening. The narrative is gaining traction. Then Grant's earlier warning surfaces in his mind. Clark. Mason's phone vibrates in his pocket. Unknown number. He steps into the hallway and answers. A frantic voice speaks in broken sentences. They found me. Parking garage. Civic center. 2 men. The line cuts. Mason does not hesitate. Stay with her, he tells Eleanor quietly. I'll be back. Valor looks up at him. Come. They move fast. The Civic Center garage is half empty. Concrete echoing with distant tire noise. Mason scans levels until he spots movement near a pillar. 2 men have Edwin Clark pinned against a car door. Clark is older than Mason expected. Nervous. Terrified. One attacker grips his collar while the other searches his briefcase. Hey! Mason calls out. The attackers turn. One lunges forward. Hold! Valor launches with precision, not wild aggression but targeted force. He grips the attacker's forearm just enough to immobilize without breaking skin. The man cries out and drops to his knees. The second attacker bolts. Mason steps in, disarms him with controlled force, and pushes him against the car. Call 911, he orders Clark. Valor maintains his hold until Mason says, Release. The dog steps back immediately. Police sirens echo faintly in the distance. Clark's hands shake violently. She sent them, he whispers. If I testify, I'm finished. You're finished if you don't, Mason says evenly. Clark swallows hard. I have records, estate transfers, chemical purchase orders. It was never natural. Mason looks him in the eye. Then you're coming with me. Back at the courthouse, the hearing has progressed. Eleanor sits alone at the defense table. Victoria's attorney concludes, given the subject's impaired judgment and associations, temporary incompetency is warranted. The judge removes her glasses slowly. Ms. Whitmore, the judge says, your absence earlier and erratic conduct raise serious concern. Eleanor lifts her chin. I was almost removed from a hospital without order, she says steadily. That is not erratic. That is survival. The courtroom doors open. Mason enters. Valor at heel. Edwin Clark just behind them. Every head turns. Victoria's composure falters for the first time. Clark's voice trembles but carries. I have evidence regarding prior estates, he says. The judge's eyes narrow. This court is prepared to rule, she says carefully. Unless compelling evidence is presented immediately. Victoria watches the clock. Mason feels the weight of seconds compressing. If Clark falters, if the judge dismisses him, Eleanor loses everything. The gavel hovers just above the block. And the ruling is seconds away. The courtroom doors close behind Mason with a solid echo that silences the murmurs. Valor walks precisely at heel, head level, ignoring the cameras and whispers. He does not pull. He does not react. He is focused entirely on Mason's posture and tone. Edwin Clark moves beside them, pale but upright, clutching a thin leather folder to his chest like a shield. The judge looks down from the bench. You have requested to present additional testimony, she says evenly. Proceed carefully. Mason nods once and steps aside so Clark can approach the witness stand. Valor settles at Mason's left with a quiet down. Clark raises his right hand and is sworn in. His voice shakes at first. I previously served as a state counsel to Victoria Mercer, he begins, using the name deliberately. A ripple moves through the gallery. Victoria does not react outwardly, but her jaw tightens. Clark continues. I assisted in the transfer of assets following the deaths of her first 2 spouses. I believed at the time their deaths were natural. Later evidence suggested otherwise. Be specific, the judge says. Clark opens the folder. There were chemical procurement records routed through shell entities. Substances that mimic cardiac failure when administered in small, sustained doses. The room shifts from curiosity to stillness. Victoria's attorney rises. Objection. Speculation. Overruled for preliminary review, the judge replies. Continue. Clark places printed financial documents on the evidence table. These transfers correspond with large payments into entities later consolidated under Mercer Holdings. The same holding structure funding the attempted medical transport this morning. Mason steps forward and holds up his phone. With the court's permission. The judge nods. The image of the ambulance text thread appears on the courtroom display. Mercer Holdings. Discretion required. Transport before hearing. Grant Holloway enters quietly at that moment and hands additional financial binders to the clerk. These are corporate transaction logs from Whitmore Innovations, Grant says. Stock depreciation patterns align with coordinated board pressure and shell company acquisitions. The judge scans quickly. Victoria stands abruptly. This is theatrical, she says sharply. A coordinated smear by a disgruntled recluse and a frightened woman. Lucas shifts in his seat near the rear exit. Clark swallows and presses on. Robert Whitmore began requesting private toxicology screenings before his death. He suspected irregularities. Those files were suppressed. Eleanor's breath catches. The judge's gaze sharpens. Mr. Clark, are you alleging homicide? Yes, Your Honor. Victoria's composure fractures. She steps forward from the defense table, voice rising. You pathetic coward, she hisses toward Clark. You owe everything you have to me. Court security stiffens. Victoria's hand moves suddenly toward the pen resting on the defense table. In one sharp motion, she lunges toward Clark. Block. The command is instant. Valor explodes forward with controlled precision. Not a wild attack but a targeted intercept. His body wedges between Clark and Victoria. His jaws close firmly around her wrist without breaking skin, halting the forward motion completely. Victoria gasps as the pen clatters harmlessly to the floor. Release. Valor lets go immediately and steps back to Mason's side, posture tall but calm. The entire courtroom stands frozen for half a second before security officers rush in and restrain Victoria. The moment strips away polish and control. This is no longer social influence. It is desperation. The judge strikes the gavel once, hard. Emergency conservatorship petition denied, she says clearly. Based on credible evidence presented, this court orders an immediate investigation into allegations of financial fraud and possible criminal conduct. Victoria is escorted toward the side exit, still protesting. Federal agents enter from the rear doors almost simultaneously, badges visible. Interstate fraud and financial conspiracy, one agent announces. We'll be taking custody pending further inquiry. Lucas attempts to slip through the gallery exit. An agent intercepts him before he reaches the door. Lucas Carrington, you are being detained for questioning related to coordinated financial misconduct. His confident public posture collapses into visible panic. The gallery murmurs again, but this time it is different. Not doubt. Recognition. The agent who approaches Mason pauses briefly. Chief Reed, he says quietly, respectful but not loud enough for spectacle. Your documentation helped move this quickly. The title lands in the air. Eve. Some in the gallery glance toward Mason with new understanding. He does not respond with pride. Only a nod. The judge looks down at Eleanor. Ms. Whitmore, she says, tone steady but changed. You remain in full control of your affairs. This court recognizes your competency. Eleanor exhales slowly, shoulders dropping for the first time in days. She turns her wheelchair slightly toward Valor. Cameras flash again, but she ignores them. She lowers her hand carefully and rests it against the German shepherd's neck. Thank you, she says softly, voice steady now. You held the line when I couldn't. Valor remains perfectly still, accepting the contact without distraction. In the silence that follows, it is not wealth or power that commands attention. It is loyalty, controlled, disciplined, unshaken. And for the first time since the storm began, Eleanor is no longer being managed. She is being respected. Victoria Mercer is formally indicted on multiple counts of financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. Federal investigators reopen prior estate cases tied to her past marriages. The narrative of polished philanthropy dissolves under audit trails and sworn testimony. Lucas Carrington accepts a negotiated deal in exchange for cooperation. Groomed or not, he made choices. The board votes to remove him from any advisory role permanently. Edwin Clark, under structured immunity, provides detailed documentation of estate transfers and shell corporations. His testimony becomes the keystone of the broader case. He does not walk free without consequence, but he walks with accountability instead of fear. Whitmore Innovations stabilizes within weeks. The emergency board session is tense but decisive. Financial irregularities are isolated. Complicit members resign. Public confidence begins to return. When Eleanor rolls into the executive boardroom for the first time after the ruling, no one questions her capacity. No one speaks over her. The vote is unanimous. Chief Executive Officer. Not appointed through manipulation. Not transferred through legal coercion. Earned. The press asks whether she will move into public security or relocate permanently. She declines. Months later, winter softens into early spring on Iron Ridge. Mason stands outside his cabin, splitting wood under pale sunlight. Valor lies nearby, muzzle dusted with gray now but posture unchanged. Watchful. Steady. A vehicle climbs the ridge road slowly. Mason does not tense. He recognizes it. Eleanor steps out once the engine cuts. She maneuvers her chair confidently across packed gravel. The mountain air carries no urgency this time. Only quiet. I thought you'd disappear again, she says gently. I considered it, Mason answers. She smiles faintly. I'm glad you didn't. They do not speak about the court, or the cameras, or the wealth. They speak about rebuilding, about clarity, about not mistaking isolation for strength. Later that afternoon, beneath the tall pines, a small private ceremony takes place. No media, no spectacle, just a handful of trusted friends and the sound of wind moving through branches. Valor sits beside Mason throughout, alert but calm. Afterward, Eleanor turns her chair toward the dog. Slowly, carefully, she lowers herself forward until she is face to face with him at his level. She wraps her arms around his neck. Valor remains perfectly still, accepting the embrace as naturally as he once accepted the command to block. Thank you, she whispers again, this time without fear behind it. The mountain does not answer. Does not need to. Mason looks out over the ridge, no longer measuring his life in silence. He measures it in presence. In choosing to stand. In refusing to look away when power moves quietly. Real strength is choosing who stands beside you when power tries to own you. Loyalty is not loud. It is steady.